Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm Jimmy from the Health Cabinet, and this morning Kathy Darden, one of our parish nurses, set this forum up for the visiting angels in Rochester to speak, and then Kathy had Thanksgiving today, so she asked me to fill in for her. Kathy's one of the parish nurses on the Health Cabinet, along with Jan Dickey, and there's a couple members. Chris is here today from the Health Cabinet, and Bernard Peterson is here. Well, oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, Visiting Angels was a organization that was started in 1998, and it's a franchise thing, and they're mainly involved in non-medical care of homebound people, and they've been in Rochester since 2009. Joe Settlemeyer opened the franchise here, and our speaker today, Amy Tucker, is the operations manager and care coordinator for them. And I'd like to bring her on, and there's information on the tables, and if there's not enough, there's more up here, and we can get it to you after the questions. Thanks.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. All right. So I think what I'm here to do today is just give you some information. Again, Visiting Angels. I was in a completely different line of work. When I moved to Rochester, I was a corporate trainer. And then I decided I want to do something a little bit more meaningful. And I didn't really like working for corporations anymore. And I got my CNA. And I worked in a nursing home for a bit, and then I found Visiting Angels, and I absolutely love it. Two of our biggest missions is to allow people to age gracefully in their home. People do better being in their home as long as possible, not separating loved ones. It just works better. And then our second mission is to educate people about dementia. So we have hundreds of clients, and 85% of our clients are dealing with some sort of memory cognition problem, mostly dementia of some sort. There's hundreds of different types of dementia. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. We work closely with the Alzheimer's Association. So, like was said, I've been there for 11 years now, and I love my job. I absolutely love my job. I love connecting our caregivers to our people. So what do we do? You mentioned that it's non-medical. So what that means is we don't do IVs and nurse-delegated tasks, but we do a lot of stuff. So we have clients that we see once a week for 3 to 6 hours, right? And then we have clients that we are helping 24-hour care around the clock. So there's a lot of in between there. Some of our clients need companionship. Adult children are not near, and they've lost their significant other, or their significant other just isn't able to care for them. So we run errands, we take people to doctor's appointments, hair appointments, we do that. And then we do help with bathing, showering, we call it activities of daily living. Med reminders, we can do medication setup and med administration. We work with hospice, so we work with end-of-life care. Sometimes it's just respite for a significant other or an adult child who has to work, and the person that we're caring for just cannot be left alone. There's confusion, or there's ambulation concerns, wandering concerns. So that's a really broad idea of what we do. We're in Rochester, Austin, Albert Lea, Spring Valley, Stewartville. We have 115 employees. 102 of those are caregivers. Our caregivers range in age from 18 years old students, mostly nursing or medical students, that come to work for us. They like working for us because we are extremely flexible. And we're not just flexible like it says on the McDonald's sign, we really are flexible. So we allow caregivers to come in and they tell us what they can work. And then we have caregivers, not a ton, but we have caregivers that are 80. One of my favorites, she's worked there as long as I have, she's 80 now. And her particular client, she only takes care of one, is 101. And they are just the cutest things ever. So, but we're really about, it starts with Joe. Joe is the owner, like you mentioned. He worked for IBM. He was in New York, worked for IBM for years, came to Rochester, and then, as happened sometime with IBM, laid off, and he was trying to figure out, what am I going to do now? And his mom is suffering from dementia, so he wanted to do something to help with that, and so he opened this franchise. He is the kindest man, and he really, really takes care of his employees, and then that makes us take care of our caregivers. I mean, we get to know them. What do you like? What don't you like? When can you work? How many hours? What do you, we know their lives. We could throw any name out there that works for us, and I could tell you their story, and that. So then they, because they feel loved and cared for, it bleeds right through, and then they love and care for their clients. And most of the review process that I do is through tears of joy and sadness, talking about their clients. They truly love each other, and their clients love their caregivers, and we work with matching to really figure out who's going to work best. So that's what we do well. We are private pay, so we don't take your typical medical insurance. We are paid, we can take long-term care insurance, so that is something that is an option for people. But I've seen, it's not so much, I'm not here talking about, hey, I want you to use our services. It's not a sales pitch. It's really to give you education, because what happens, or what we see happens, is people calling us in crisis. So they are at the end of their rope. It's a husband and a wife who are scared to admit how much they need help because they're afraid of what might happen. And then the wife might be the person who is suffering with dementia or some type of debilitating diagnosis. And then the husband who's trying to care for her and not really overshare. They don't want to bother the adult children. They're worried about, how will we pay for this? Will we have to move? All those things play into it. And so then what happens is that caregiver, that husband, he falls ill because there's so much stress. And then guess what? Then you're in crisis mode, and you don't have as many choices as you do if you start thinking about it now, right? So to adult children, I say, talk to your parents. What do they want? What are their wishes? Is it to stay in their home as long as possible, and then start putting those pieces together? Well, how are we going to do that? How much is it going to cost? So give us a call, and we'll sit down for free and just give you a consultation of what it looks like if you were to use home care. We do work with facilities, so we go into the Charter House, Madonna Towers, the Waters, and we assist inside of those facilities. And then Shorewood, there are facilities that have their own people, and you get to choose. You can either use their people or our people or somebody else's people. But the idea is to start thinking about what it is that you want so that that can be written out and you have some kind of plan. Because when you're in crisis, you don't get to choose. If you end up in a rehab center, it's going to be whatever rehab center is open. And then if they say you can't go back to your home, then you're stuck. Some of these places have years waiting lists. So it's a good idea if you think, hey, if you're dealing with a dementia diagnosis, that's a pretty smart thing to think of. If we can't afford to stay in our home together, then you want to start looking at facilities that have step-up units, meaning maybe it's an assisted living to start, and you have somebody like Visiting Angels come in and check on every once in a while, right? Give the other spouse a break so they can go grocery shopping or even go to support groups, things like that. And then a step-up unit, meaning that they have a memory care or more services that you could step into. So those are things to think about. Adult children, you're never too young to start thinking about this. Long-term care, that's another thing. A lot of people have been paying for it for years and years and years, and they don't know they have it, or the adult children or the significant other is trying to fumble through that. I'm going to tell you right now, that is not an easy thing to do, and it's almost impossible when you are in crisis mode. They don't make it easy. So if you know that you have a long-term care policy, pull it out. Make the phone calls now and say, how long do I have to wait before you kick in? What do you cover? What do I need to provide prior to you reimbursing me for the care that I've been paying for 30 years? So know that. Those are things to know. Otherwise, I think that's kind of the nuts and bolts, and then I just wanted to leave it open for questions on anything, and I'll try to answer it.
I go to Alzheimer's support group, and they were saying that you can take the patient out
We can.
for a ride or whatever.
We absolutely can. So I spoke briefly about dementia and Alzheimer's being one of our missions to get, and I don't think I went into it really well, to get information out there. So one of the things, I'm dementia certified. We use a teaching called Teepa Snow. She has a different method of teaching about dementia. So myself and an RN at our office, Judy, we both have been going through the training to get Teepa Snow dementia certified, and then we teach our caregivers. The other thing that we do and can do is we put on free education seminars to teach about this particular way of caring for somebody with dementia. So the long answer to your question is there is a method, and the more people that can be educated about understanding dementia and how you handle people with dementia, the better our world can be, our little community, and then it just spreads. So yes, our caregivers, we spend a great deal of time, because 85% of our clients are suffering with some sort of dementia or memory. We spend a great deal of our time educating them so that they can take people out safely into the community and do activities, doctor's appointment or activities. Some clients like to take long rides in the fall. So yeah, we can do that.
You said there's 11 kinds of dementia. Could you give us a little more?
There's 100 different kinds of dementia, but okay, we'll just do 3 or 4. There's frontal lobe dementia. There is, and now my brain is going to blank for a second, but that's okay. Some of the really hard ones, well, there's Parkinson's dementia. Alzheimer's takes up a big balloon of the dementia category. Frontal lobe is really hard to deal with. Frontal lobe, you start losing things like the ability to swallow first. which is hard because in a lot of dementias, that's later stage dementia. Frontal lobe starts that first, so that can be really frustrating and hard for family because cognitively they can remember a little bit more than somebody, but forget how to swallow. How scary is that, you know? So that can be scary. The one that I'm thinking of that is also Lewy body dementia, that one is super tough. There's a lot of behaviors that come with Lewy body, aggressiveness, verbal inappropriateness typically comes with Lewy body, and that's really hard for a family who is not used to dealing with that. They're not used to seeing their mom cuss like a sailor, or suddenly their dad starts making racial slurs and it's embarrassing, and they don't know how to handle it. So Lewy body, there's hundreds. I can look them up for you if you want.
Familiar with some of those.
Okay.
I was interested in the lighter ones. Those are the heavy ones.
Yeah.
How will I know when I'm
Okay.
experiencing?
So you're asking a different question. Okay. So that's a very popular question. What is normal aging versus dementia? When do I know that I have dementia? Well, I'm going to tell you a few things. Normal aging is not being able to remember your child's birthday. That's normal aging. Walking into the kitchen and you cannot remember what you walked in there for, normal aging. Getting off the phone with your friend and they said they were going to meet you at Barnes & Noble at the mall, you hang up the phone and you cannot remember where they said they were going to meet you, normal aging. Losing your cell phone, normal aging. Forgetting people's names is 100% normal aging.
If you do all of those things, is that normal?
That's normal, yes. You are 100% normal. What I tell people, one of the examples I give is if, and this is, and I'll talk about that next, but one of the examples I give is if you forget, like you're sitting there eating with your family, and you're like, hey, can you hand me and it's a fork, right? And now you're worried because you're like, okay, I can't remember a fork. I definitely have dementia. No. But if somebody hands you a fork and you can't remember what to do with the fork, that might be something that's just a little bit concerning. But here's the thing. You've got to get to a doctor and get a diagnosis. So some people want to hide it, but there are a lot of things that disguise themselves as dementia. Some of it could be med interactions. And that's what's making you forget the fork, right? So you can get that fixed if that's the case. And if it is dementia, I just went to a brain conference at Mayo, at Civic Center. It's really huge, great. They are making a lot of strides. There is no cure, but they have found ways to slow it way down, and it's working. And Mayo, be grateful that you're here, is leading the way. At that brain conference, we had people all over the world, doctors and clinics all over the world, zooming in to hear what these doctors had to say. So, again, UTIs act funny with people. There are other diagnoses that could be, but people are so scared of it that they don't want to admit that they can't, that they might have that, right? Because let's face it, it's not fun. It's ugly. If I could get rid of one thing, I would get rid of that, honestly, because it just stinks. But it's important to get a diagnosis. Did that answer your question?
Very helpful.
Okay.
Would you please elaborate a bit more about TIPA snow? I don't think I wrote it down correctly, but I would like to know pretty please, just some bullet points about.
Sure. TEPA Snow, it's called TEPA Snow, TEEPASNOW. And then if you look it up, it's called the Positive Approach to Care. The main difference is, one of the starting points that she developed is to stop talking about stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, right? Because that makes it this, first of all, when you're talking about stages, you're talking about the things that you can't do anymore. So, and then it's like this, you're put in this little box and that's it, you can't go back. She talks in jewels. So she'll say, this person is a sapphire. Everybody here in this room is a sapphire. Normal, aging, memory. Everybody here is a sapphire. And then you move to a diamond. And I'm a diamond a lot of times. Diamonds are pretty cool until things don't go exactly the way they want or stress is involved, and then they get a little bit more rigid and sharper with the tongue, so that we all can be diamonds sometimes. And then you move to rubies, and there's characteristics of the rubies. The difference between talking about these and talking about stages is we focus on what you can do. So she says, instead of saying, once you hit a stage 3, you're not going to be able to dress yourself anymore, she says that once you hit a ruby, you still can hear rhythm and dance. You have mobility if you're a ruby. So that's one of the main differences. The second one is knowing what those cans are and approaching people with those cans. I know what you can do, and so I'm going to change my approach with you based on what I know you can't do. That makes a big difference. That the approach has changed my life. I use it with my kids. I use it with other people. It just makes so much sense. So the big thing is sight starts to become a problem in dementia. And you start to lose your sight, and you start kind of out here, and they call it a scuba, and then it goes to binocular, and then it goes to like just one. Well, that's scary if you can't remember people, and then you really can't see it. And most people, are walking up to you, and they're just, hey, remember me, And if you can't see very well, and you can't remember, and you can't form complete sentences, then you get some of that aggressive behavior, right? And then people are like, hey, knock it off. That's not nice. It's me, your favorite daughter. It's not helpful, right? And then there's, so part of it is just, I can give you little clips of it, but we do this seminar for free, and it's super fun, and you will walk away feeling good. But one of the things that we do is we stand back, so we know that vision, could be, and then we give people our names. And I wish everybody would do this, because do you know how frightening it is when someone comes up to you, and we're normal aging, right? We've decided everybody here is pretty much normal aging, and they come up to you and say, hey, how are the kids? I just saw such and such, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're sweating because you're like, this person really knows me, and I can't even come up with their name. So start just saying, hi, Amy, Sue, how are you? So put it to myself, and I've already taken that stress. That really, really helps. What we see adult children do is, Mom, it's me. Okay? So that's, if you can imagine what I just shared, when you walk out into a place, right, and somebody knows me and I can't call their name, now think about someone calling you Mom and you can't come up with their name. Scary, right? So that's part of the positive approach. Does that answer? Okay, yes, okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Often, loss of hearing is associated with dementia.
Yes, so that's great. Thank you for bringing that up. So it is sight first. So we made sure that we get into the line of sight the best we can. Then it is hearing, right? And then the last one is physical touch. So if you're, and the way Teepa explains it is if you are talking before you're getting into that line of sight, you've got the gun, and she says just, because if you're talking to someone and they're not in their line of sight, the other thing with dementia is you start to lose language. So hearing is absolutely 100% part of dementia, but also you start to just lose the connectivity of words. So instead of walking in and saying, Mom, it's 10 o'clock, remember we have to go to the doctor. Oh, did you see Lizzie and what she was wearing? What Mom hears is 10, Lizzie, wearing. So slow down, and use less words. Mom, 10 o'clock, doctor appointment, shoes. Like, let's get our shoes on. So using your hands and using, we also talk about this or that. So stop giving so many choices. And again, a lot of this stuff is helpful for me. When I'm in a stress state, don't ask me what I want to eat. I have no idea. But if you say, do you want something cold or something hot? I might be able to answer that question. Cold. Stay away from yes or no questions. Are you hungry? If they say no, now what? So take that away. So should we get, are you thirsty or hungry? And even though it sounds kind of silly, it's so helpful, right? Do you want chicken soup or an egg sandwich? I guarantee you're more likely to get an answer that way. The other one is repetitive questions or repetitive statements that get stuck on something. So you're sitting maybe in the new memory facility that they just moved to, and you hear, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home. Typical response, Mom, you are home. Mom, this is home. Mom, I've told you already, this is home, right? So the better way to answer that is, you want to go home. Reaffirming you want to go home. Even if you're sitting in their home. How does that feel too, if you just think about how I would like to be talked to, right? I'm just giving an example. If I'm really stressed out and I say, I'm running around the house, I'm so stressed out. Is it helpful for someone to say you shouldn't be stressed out? No, it's not helpful. So reaffirm to them, you want to go home. Remember, they've lost a lot of vocabulary, and that's what they're stuck on. That's the only thing they can say. Usually, or a lot of times, when people are saying, I want to go home, they can't verbalize to you, I'm cold, I'm hungry, my shoulder hurts. So they say, I want to go home. So, using this or that, you can say, you want to go home. Okay. Are you cold or hungry? You can say, do you need to use the bathroom or are you thirsty? To try to get to, and it works. Sometimes they'll say bathroom, and they'll shake their head, bathroom. It doesn't always work, because if this was 100% working, we'd be done. We wouldn't even be having a conversation right now. But so that's one. The other popular one is when people are melting down. It's really frustrating when you can't get your words out. You don't know who you are. You don't know who these people are around you. You don't even know what a fork is and how you're supposed to use it. And now people are pulling on you to get your coat on, right? So those escalations that happen, they can happen rather quickly. One way to settle down an escalation is to A, step back, get out of that private space, and the private space is 6 feet. So, what's in public space is 6 feet, private space is within an arm's reach. So get out of that private space, get back in their line of vision, and I mean, they might be frailing or throwing things, kind of step back so that you don't get hurt. And then one that we find works very well is simply this: I'm sorry this is hard. I'm sorry you're frustrated. And keep repeating it. I am sorry that this is hard. And you'd be surprised how well that works. And how well it works with my teenage kids. You know, they're throwing a fit because they can't go to that party. I'm sorry, this is frustrating. I know you want to go to that party. I'm sorry. Now use it with a dementia person. They're people. They're still people. So it works.
Strokes and dementia, does that normally accelerate the possibilities or?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what you mean is if you've had a stroke, so I'm not 100% sure that I can speak on strokes causing dementia, but I can speak to the fact that after a stroke, there are definite brain changes that are often dementia-like. I don't know that I know that it's called, well, there's a vascular dementia. So there is a dementia that's called vascular. I can't 100% speak to if the stroke caused the dementia or what, if that's vascular dementia, but there is a vascular dementia. And without the dementia diagnosis, strokes can sometimes, we would treat somebody with a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury. Stroke would fall into that the same way we would with dementia. There's definite brain changes. There's emotional changes. Yep.
So how does a physician diagnose dementia? And I also, I went to that conference, I've done some reading that there was a coming blood test that may be available eventually to diagnose dementia.
Yep, you know what? They did speak of that a little bit. My brain can't hold all that information. I have like a stack of stuff that I took away from there that I'm just starting to dwindle down, but there was talk about that blood test. How it's done now is CAT scans. So if there's a reason that you need to get a CAT scan, can identify early, moderate, cognitive brain changes. There is your physician will be able to do certain memory tests to pinpoint if there is a brain or memory depletion. And then usually if you hit a certain score within that, then they'll send you to specialists that will be able to pinpoint it more, which I believe is done with CAT scan. But yes, they talked about the blood test as well.
And they would be able to determine at that point what form of dementia you may have, being there's so many?
Yeah, there are so many. Yes, the answer is yes. How they do that, I don't know. Do you know?
What was the question?
How, so once you get the diagnosis, the question is, how do they, there's hundreds of types of dementia. Then how do they say, well, this is vascular dementia and this is Lewy body dementia? That's a really good question that I don't know the answer to. Yeah.
Because I've done like clinical trials where we've done a lot of MRIs, but then they do PET scans. And so they'll, like one will be attached to the plaques, and then the other one would be attached to the tangles you sometimes.
Okay.
So it's a lot of imaging too that they.
A lot of imaging. And where it's attacking first.
And yeah, and then sometimes it's if they'll see the brain decrease in size. That's
Right.
another thing. So yeah, so imaging is
Yes. Yes.
I'll just talk for a second. I'm an adult medicine doctor here. So the diagnosis of dementia and how you differentiate them is pretty complex pretty quickly. Most of it, there are things that are helpful, like various blood tests and forms of imaging. Most of it really is a clinical diagnosis, talking a lot with the patient and the members about what their story has been, what kind of changes we've seen, what people can do, what people can't do, and how quickly that has changed. And then what other symptoms are associated with it that help us narrow down what has happened to give more of a diagnosis. The ultimate diagnosis of a type of dementia, it's very messy because most of them don't have a diagnostic feature where we can take a blood test and say this blood test showed Alzheimer's. Most of it is called diagnoses of exclusion, which means we have determined that this isn't a B12 deficiency, and this isn't an infection, and this isn't a thyroid problem. So what's left is a couple of these other things. Giving a name to one of those is honestly probably a little bit up in the air because a lot of the actual diagnosis is based off of what we have not diagnosed as opposed to what we have. Because even if we get a PET scan or a CT scan or an MRI that shows certain buildups of different proteins, you can see some of those in people who have normal aging. So if I say this person has some memory loss and they have this buildup of proteins, can I say that that's Alzheimer's? Not necessarily. The only way to ultimately diagnose Alzheimer's is on an autopsy, which we don't do on
Which is good.
But so the name we give to the diagnosis is important, but how we get there is very complicated.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned hearing and sight, and you said physical touch. What did you say?
Okay, so another mistake that people make is touching before we have that sight and hearing connection, right? We're so busy and we go right up and we shake. I keep picking on you, but we just start shaking people's hands. Or another popular one, should I pick on somebody else? I'll pick on is, mom is sitting here, and she's enjoying a meal and you're not looking at me, right? And we come up and say, hey, right? Like, that's not fun for a lot of people, right? Geez. So it's that startle, that touch. Now you're talking about, you're sitting there in a chair, and instead of me grabbing your line of sight and saying, Harlan, hey, Amy, right now I'm here, and he hears me, versus, Harlan, we got to get going, right? That's not fun for Harlan, because all he sees is this big red blob, and now somebody's tugging on him. So that's what the touch was about. Did I answer that? Okay. Yep. Anything else? Questions about visiting angels or anything?
I put in defense.
Yes. Oh, because you're a toucher? Is that what you're defending?
I'm going to say, just because we're hard of hearing doesn't mean we have dementia.
Okay.
I hear my defense.
Because we're hard of hearing doesn't mean we have dementia. So I think what she's saying is, please don't start saying, Janet, hi, Amy, right? You don't want us to do that. So know that. How are you? Okay, good. Yes. How are our fees set up? Right, so we do by the hour, is how much that it'll cost. And we have minimums. So for visiting angels, where if you're in Rochester, it's a 2-hour daily minimum, 6 hours a week. So to use us, you'd have to use 2 3-hour visits, or 3 2-hour visits. And we are on the low scale of minimums. There's other agencies that do it, and their minimums are higher. So we try to stay low. The reason that our minimums are set up the way they are is simply because our caregivers, right? They need guaranteed hours and blocks of time that make sense for them. So that's why we have to kind of do this balance. But yeah, does that answer it? Kind of. I did bring on the tables there are these little sheets that kind of talk about our services. The prices aren't in there, but our phone number is there. And we'll give you all that information over the phone. It gets a little bit complicated depending on what you need, so I don't want to just start throwing prices out there, but you can give us a call if you're truly interested in what that looks like.
So,
Yep.
in the aging study that Mayo has,
Yes.
they always have a blood draw, but they never tell us what it's for.
They probably don't know.
And I don't. I mean, when you go to a regular, like, they always tell you, you know, your blood sugar, whatever, there, but the aging study, they don't, maybe they.
Well, like he said, there is no tried and true yet, so I imagine they're collecting that because it is a study to start looking for similarities and commonalities, right?
Yeah, I don't know what their protocol is. But I'll-
Okay. But that's what I'm guessing is that they're trying to say your name is, what's your name?
Bob.
Bob? Bob! Hi! Hey.
Now you're supposed to say, no, I know your first name, what's your last name? That was an old salesman trick, you know.
What was the old sales trick?
Well, you know, you said Bob, and no, I know your first name, what's your last name?
Oh,
Sales trick.
okay.
So you got both of them like that.
Okay, perfect. See, I did good. But they might say, okay, Bob is in this study, and whatever they're looking for, Bob's blood looks like this. And oh, hey, look, Amy is also in this study, and they have all these different commonalities, and look what we're finding in their blood. So my best guess, at a really simplistic, is that they're trying to find those connections, is my guess. But like you said, I don't know. And it's complicated. Just give it to them, it's fine. Maybe they're working on cloning you. No! Not another Bob. Yes?
Have you heard that lutefisk helps in this?
I'm going to go with dementia if that's the case. So.
Sure.
Yeah. Ugh.
I'm curious, in this country, we have this percent of this dementia stuff. What about in
Sweden or
Sweden and Russia, other countries, is it similar?
That's a good question. Do you know that?
I don't know.
I don't know, but I'm going to find out and I'm going to email
Other
you.
diet and culture and those kind of things contribute.
There is a lot of, well, here, so there was, what came up as the morbidities, at that Mayo presentation, they're finding a high link to stress, depression, anxiety, diabetes kind of hit the list for a lot of crossover. So if diabetes did, then I would say yes to diet. So those are the 4 that I remember. So what is the answer to that? Of course, the physical activity came up. So get out and walk, and that's good for your brain. And if you are suffering with depression or anxiety or continual stress, get to your doctor and get that treated would be my pre-advice. Free class. So we set it up with places. So like this church, could say, hey, Amy and Judy, can you come in? People are interested in hearing this TIFA Snow dementia, Alzheimer's presentation. It is, at its fullness, it is a 2-hour class, but we take breaks. But we can shorten it. It's just not quite as impactful, but we can. We'll do whatever people need. So an organization will come to us and we'll put it on for them. Yep. So tell your church. Okay. Yeah. Yes?
Does Medicare cover any of this?
It doesn't. So Medicare is not going to cover home health. They will cover short-term disabilities like a hip replacement. So they'll have somebody that can come in your home for an amount of time, but they're not going to cover home health. Yep.
I just wanted to say that people that I know that have used your services, for them, it is such a relief.
It is.
Just have somebody there so they can take a little break.
Yep, it is. I mean, it is. That's why I said have conversations now. Call now, and start thinking about that kind of stuff. But that is another reason that I love my job, is because we do make people's lives better. We're not perfect, but we do, and I love that. So, yep.
You kind of have the opposite problem. My father's 82 and we can't get him not to do stuff.
Yep.
Days after getting a pacemaker, he's out shoveling and he's out riding bike. Climbing ladders. It's like, Dad, are we being selfish and controlling? And I try not to be, but tell myself I'm not my father's mother.
Right.
You know, I try not to show that. What are you doing?
Right.
I want to take you back to the hospital.
Exactly. Has he been in the hospital?
Oh, yeah, many times. We just let him do what he's gonna do and say, when it's time for you to go, and that's terrifying to see an 82-year-old like that riding a bike down the street, but then we're glad he can.
Yep, absolutely. That is tricky.
Is that the right thing to do? It's like I try not to be controlling about it.
Yep. Ultimately, we do have to have the respect to let them make their own choices. The earlier you can start having conversations, so a conversation with your dad might look like, Dad, if one of these times you go into the hospital with a broken hip, what is your goal? Do you want us to move you into a nursing home, or do you want to stay at home? And so if Dad says, I want to stay in my home, and say, okay, I want to help you do what you want. So can we say no ladders? You know, just call me up, or, you know, and then I think we'll be closer to getting you to your goal. But we have some really stubborn people, and and the other answer to your question, like, have the conversation. Like, what do you want, Dad? Because this is what I'm thinking. Have the conversation so that you can always keep their wants and needs at the front. And then sometimes you have to let people fail, you know? So it's no different than with our parents. And it's scary, it's terrifying to picture your dad falling off a bike in the middle of the street in the dead cold of winter. That is terrifying. But, you know, it's our kids too. It's terrifying, right? To let them make their own choices, and you just pray to God that He's got it, right? And you gotta let them go. So it's really no different with your parents. It's not in our hands, but a lot of praying, a lot of talking. Yes?
Yeah, one other thing.
Yep.
My husband just went to the VA and they said he should have a directive. What is that called?
That he should have a directive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the questions that they ask you. What do you want? So it's all written down.
Correct.
Because I didn't know before this that the wife cannot make those choices. It has to be there.
Yep. So if you don't have a healthcare directive, you do want to do that. Some of that is, do you want to be on life support? Do you want CPR? Do you want a lot of questions really comes down to it is how you want to be handled when you can't speak for yourself anymore, right? And that's important that you get that written down. And it makes it easier on family and loved ones, right? I don't want to make that choice for my dad, but if I know this is what my dad wanted, it's easier for me to be okay with whatever that was. Yep.
So, if you're in the hospital and you don't have that director, the hospital will keep you.
They will do, they will, yep,
So you have to have a.
they can, yes. Or an adult child can say,
Or your spouse.
or your spouse can say, do whatever it takes.
Spouse, it cannot do it anymore. In the state of Minnesota, there's a law that the spouse cannot make the decision.
They can't say, take them off the machine maybe, but they can, the hospital is going to do whatever by whatever means possible. And then I think there's an insurance part of that too. Yep.
So there's no way, like I have in mind from my grandparents, that you can sign a paper saying, I want my wife to be able to tell me.
Yeah, you can. You can do a medical power of attorney, and that can be part of your directive. Yep, you can. Yes. Yep.
I'm Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Do you think this younger generation is gonna have worse memory problems? Because at work, I work with a lot of really, really young people, and they always tell me, how can you remember all this? You know, because when you ask them the question, they reach for their cell phone.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though they probably know the answer, they're not sure, so they Google it up.
They also don't know how to get anywhere if their battery dies. So, which is kind of fun actually, to watch people struggle. But that's a hard question to answer. There is a lot of research being done on the amount of screen time and how long they can obtain attention span. So, you know, right now the average video has to be less than 1 minute to keep attention span. Yep. If it's 15 minutes, you can forget about it. If it's 5 minutes, that's a century. They're not going to watch it. They need quick. So I don't know about the memory part, but it is interesting. And I can't imagine where we're going to be when my kids have kids. Like, what else could you tattoo, pierce, or... I just don't know what it'll be like. I mean, because every generation says, right, is wowed by the generation that's coming up. It's like, what could the next generation possibly do to make us go, oh! I don't know. Yes?
In the early 1900s, there were people that thought we should shut down the patent office because there's nothing good to make.
Is that, yes, see? And that is a very, very good point. Yeah.
How big of an area do you cover?
So I was talking about Austin, Albert Lee, Spring Valley, Preston. I don't know how many, miles. In our office, there's a big circle, so that. But a lot of it, when you start getting into the outside areas, I mean, we do Stewartville, Byron, Casson, Mantorville. It's like Austin and Albert Lee are an hour. But I was going to say a 30-mile radius, but Austin and Albert Lee are an hour. So, but really what it depends on as you start getting out in those areas is our caregiver availability. We can say we cover Spring Valley, we can say we cover Albert Lee, but if we don't honestly have enough caregivers in that area, we might not be able to serve the outside. Mm-hmm.
Is there a shortage of caregivers?
Is there what?
Shortage.
Oh. Yes. Yeah, it's a hard job. Lots of turnover. And so yes is the answer to that question. It just is by nature a hard job to keep people at.
What did he ask?
He asked if there's a shortage of caregivers, and the short answer is yes. Are we doing okay? We are. But we really work on retention. We have caregivers that have been doing this for 35 years. Yeah, 20 years. We have caregivers who have worked for us for the entire time that it's been open. And then we have caregivers that come and go within a year. So yeah, it is hard. But being flexible and allowing them to work 5 hours a week or 60 hours a week, overnight shifts, day shifts, morning shifts, in between school shifts, helps with that. But people move, people get married, people get divorced, kids happen, and that just changes people's lives. And unlike the long careers that you're at Mayo and you have all this, retirement. We offer retirement for our caregivers, but that's a little bit different. Absorption of taking those heavy hits, but when it comes down to it, parent gets sick, I've got to leave my 10-hour-a-week job to take care of mom or to take care of my kids. It's just life. Great question. So we have a lot of CNAs that work for us. The question is, what are the requirements? What do you need as a requirement to be a caregiver? And so what I'm going to tell you is about 60% of our staff have a CNA, an HHA, or higher. We have a lot of LPNs that work for us, not as LPNs, but they have that education. A lot of retired RNs that work for us. But we will take somebody that has none of those certifications, and we will do the training.
So yeah, like me, I have a Japanese nurse license, but I don't have any license in the US. So.
Yes, so because you have experience, whether it's Japanese or American, you would be considered experienced and could come work for us. And then we would do our training on top of it. Yep. So we have a lot of stay-at-home moms that just need something for, like while they're at school, or maybe they'll just work a couple hours in the evening. A lot of people work for us because they want to give back, or they have lost somebody in their life, a grandparent, a parent, a spouse, and they know how hard that was, and they want to give back. So that's a big one. Does that answer? Okay. Let's see, we're at 10:18. Okay. Oh yes, go ahead.
What do you do if you run into a situation where it's just kind of out of control and you just do as much as you can, or?
Right. Okay. So by out of control, do you mean?
Like the home is no longer kept up.
The home is no longer kept up. Okay, so like a hoarding situation, or, yeah. Depending on the degree of the household. So we always go into our client care coordinator and our nurse always go into every home prior to sending caregivers in there. If we feel like the situation is unsafe, we will work with the family, the client, to have a cleanup plan in place. And we have resources that you could use before we will come in. I will tell you it's very rare, but it does happen. But what we don't do is we don't call and turn you into the state or file a vulnerable adult, if that's what you're asking. We work to get you to a point that we can get the help in there. Yeah. Okay.
Super.
Thank you.
My daughter
Probably Monday. Yeah.
Not unless you got it set up. I don't know if it's because they're scared that they don't know if you're going for the door. No, it's here's a great example. So John, when he was 18, wisdom teeth gone, different things. It's went by, and all of a sudden, an additional was with guarantors on the insurance, right? So this bill is for something before you get it doesn't matter. He's turned 18. Just like that thing I did, John. So John, I called up John. I'm trying to remember. I don't know what this or this or this. Finally, I don't think we need to be guessing anymore. I think we've got it. But that was she probably it's insane. My mom and dad Stop for sissy. You should. That was me yelling, go kill it.
You're gonna say hi to Bob and Karen?
I don't think I would like it.
I'm just saying you should. The people you know.
We don't need another Bob.
That's sort of the general. Is that? If the vote's been taken, they're not going to clone Bob. It was good.
Good name thing, so I have it up the right way. Yeah, you never know.